The UFC headlines a new year with a championship fight between Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit. Both are very technical, both are very tough, and both of them are veterans of the sport. It's an intriguing stylistic fight and it's a perfect way to kick off 2016. I'm doing a new format in these breakdowns where I strictly do a breakdown and an analysis, and I'll leave my predictions and thoughts in another video, so please subscribe for the upcoming prediction video, but for now let's do the breakdown. I'm Tyler and this is Rapid MMA. Robbie Lawler's last fight was a bloody 5-round war against Rory McDonald. If you haven't watched that fight, go find it. And Carlos Condit defeated Thiago Alves to secure his position to fight for the title against Robbie Lawler. A couple things to note is Condit holds a very small height and reach advantage, and Robbie Lawler is a southpaw. Other than that, their stats on paper hold out fairly even. They have a different style, but the statistics are pretty similar. Carlos Condit is the former WEC welterweight champion and former UFC interim welterweight champion. He's been trained by Greg Jackson since the age of 15. In addition, he wrestled throughout high school, holds a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, so we're looking at a very well-rounded veteran who has competed at the highest level for a long time now. Throughout his career, he's faced a few southpaws, so he has prepared for this several times before, notably Johnny Hendricks, Dong Hyun Kim, and Nick Diaz. If it's any team that can figure out how to defeat a southpaw, it would probably be Jackson Wink. That's a big advantage for Carlos Condit. What we need to look for in this fight is how Condit responds to the forward pressure of a southpaw looking for lead foot dominance. And there's a few examples to turn to. In the fight against Nick Diaz, Condit used a lot of baiting and counter-striking in the first round. His primary offense was attacking the lead leg of Diaz. Other than that, it was mostly Condit against the cage, drawing in Diaz with feints. When Diaz would step in to throw, Condit used a variety of counterattacks. Here we see Condit with his back against the fence, lead left out to gauge the distance. Diaz sees this as an opportunity to attack, so he steps forward, lead leg on the outside. Very good technique by Diaz, but Condit is obviously anticipating this and has been drawing in Diaz for most of the round, so instead of retreating and angling out, Condit very quickly moves his foot over Diaz's and establishes a dominant position and rips a right hook to the body. He avoids the counterattack from Diaz and angles out to the left, establishes the center of the octagon. Very good use of movement and evasive tactics. We see the same thing here, Diaz pressuring forward, and Condit goes low with the side kick to the body and immediately follows up with the 1-2. He circles out left and back to the center. I received a comment from someone that said, it's not a combination if the punches didn't land. However, that isn't quite the point of this. It's evasive maneuvering that we're looking at. It would have been good if that side kick landed or the 1-2 would have landed, but what we're seeing is Condit using good movement, angles, and counterattacks to frustrate Diaz. That in turn creates openings. You see the same tactics in Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm, but since Ronda Rousey's striking game wasn't quite to par with Holmes, Rousey was hit a lot more by Holm. Now, will this work against Robbie Lawler? It may, unless he decides to move laterally and cut off the octagon. That's something to look for in this fight. Is Robbie chasing him, or is he cutting off the cage? Overall, like I said, these are evasive tactics. Back against the fence, and he angles out. The downside of this is Condit was getting tagged quite a bit, and how would these tactics translate against a bigger opponent with more power, like a Robbie Lawler? For this, we can reference Condit's performance against Johnny Hendricks, a very powerful southpaw similar to Robbie Lawler. However, there isn't much we can take away since Hendricks and Lawler had very different styles. Hendricks likes to go for takedowns while Robbie is more of a sprawl and brawl kind of fighter. But we do see Condit more aggressive in that fight, while at the same time trying to maintain distance. In the end, the wrestling of Hendricks was just a little too much. Condit is a creative striker who likes to use a variety of techniques like the question mark kick, common Muay Thai teep kick or foot jabs, spinning elbows, and Superman punches off the fence. This creates a lot of openings, keeps the opponent reacting and guessing, that way they're more vulnerable to other attacks. Hopefully Condit is able to use that teep kick in this fight to keep that distance and avoid the power of Robbie. To summarize Condit, he's a crafty veteran with a great finishing rate who's never been knocked out. He works well off his back, dangerous guard, uses submission threats to get back to the feet. He is good at setting up his strikes and defending strikes. I think Condit gets a bad rep for what people saw as running in the Diaz fight, but that's the downside to this sport. Evasive tactics and counterattacking isn't as exciting and respected by fans as a fighter who constantly moves forward and imposes their will. Same thing in boxing. That's why styles make fights, and Robbie has a style that poses interesting questions against Condit. Robbie Lawler has made an excellent run in the UFC since his return in 2013. He's had one loss to Johnny Hendricks out of 8 fights, but rectified that loss in 2014. He defeated Johnny Hendricks by split decision for the welterweight championship. He then went on to defend it against Rory McDonald at UFC 189. If you haven't seen BJJ Scout's breakdown of Robbie Lawler already, then I suggest you go and do that. I'll leave the link down below in the description. Here's one of Robbie's strongest weapons, his lead right hand. Not only does it set up a lot of what he does, but it's also very damaging. So look for Robbie to cut very sharp angles outside the lead foot of his opponent. He'll take a few punches to land this, and for good reason. Once he's established his range with the right, expect him to follow up with the left. Very interesting to note in this slide, although it's hard to see, Robbie is actually stepping on the lead foot of Rory as he's coming in. That temporarily keeps Rory from moving backwards and gives Lawler a little extra time to move in and land his left hand. Here's another thing I've noticed a few times from Robbie, and it's indicative of his brawling style. Robbie's stepping in on the inside of Rory's foot. Not all that uncommon, but when we get to this high level of MMA, these little things matter. Robbie still lands his left, and it's very powerful against Rory. Whether this was an accident or on purpose, I'm not sure, but that could be something to look for or exploit if you're Carlos Condit, because being on the wrong side of the foot could lead you into the power hand of your opponent. Robbie isn't a one-dimensional striker though. Watch Robbie's fight against Jake Ellenberger. Robbie uses all sorts of movements and feints in the beginning, turning the hips, moving the upper body just to get Ellenberger to react and move backwards. Then he uses a powerful kick to the head, then to the body, then another kick to the head, but it lands with the knee. They're very snappy and powerful. He'll allow his opponent to lead the footwork and back him up sometimes, but immediately snap with the left hand counter. He uses front kicks to the head and body as well. Robbie is all about foundation, feints, power. Robbie's been submitted a couple times and only lost via knockout once a long time ago to Nick Diaz. We've seen him stiffened up against Rory McDonald, so we have seen him in bad positions, but it's not really a knock on Robbie. Like I've said before, since his return to the UFC, he's been on an absolute tear. I think one of the most important strengths of Robbie is his mindset. He seemed to be in sort of a limbo before his return to the UFC, but there's obviously something different. He smiled when Jake Ellenberger took him down, the stare down with Rory in the heat of battle, the way he talks about fighting. He loves it, and he isn't afraid to exchange. It's probably the most dangerous thing he brings against Carlos Condit. Alright, so let's speculate on strategy. I think what Carlos Condit needs to do in this fight is be evasive and keep a good distance. Condit can't allow himself to be backed against the fence as much as he was in the Diaz or Hendricks fight. Otherwise, he'll turn out to be Jake Ellenberger. If I were Condit, I would also take a page out of Frankie Edgar's book and use takedowns to set up strikes. By baiting in Lawler, waiting for him to step in, he'll be able to hit the weak plane, turn the corner, and disband from the takedown, and maybe come up with strikes to the body and head. Attacking the lead leg of Robbie will also be important, whether it's a teep to the inside leg, the common outside leg kick, or oblique kicks. He should use this to neutralize Robbie's ability to get lead foot dominance. And like we talked about before, if he's able to get Robbie to make a mistake with the footwork, he could turn off and land a right hand against Robbie. Along with leg kicks, we need to see Condit attack the body. We saw Rory have great success in the first round with the front kick, which then eventually set up the head kick. It's all about movement and evasive tactics in this fight, but he's got to also get the respect of Robbie, and I think kicks are going to be the key for Condit. If he's trying to exchange with the hands, it's going to be very hard, because Robbie is not afraid to take a punch from anyone just to land his own, because power for power, I'm pretty sure Lawler's a harder hitter. For Robbie Lawler, I'd like to see him start strong. A lot of movement and feints, just like in the Ellenberger fight and just like the second round against Rory McDonald. He can't let Condit settle into a rhythm. The issue with this fight against Rory is he allowed him to control his hands and pop jabs at him. Although Robbie landed more significant strikes in round 1 and 2, he allowed Rory to get his rhythm and time him with the jab. So, if Robbie can be first, establish the range, and utilize feints, he could end it early. Just like Condit, Robbie also should attack the legs. This is probably a more important tactic since Condit is a more mobile fighter, and since this is a 5-round fight and leg kicks work best in accumulation, Robbie should think about the long term if he can't get the knockout early. If he can keep a good pace of attacking the leg, he'll slow down Condit and potentially injure him, because I know Condit injured his leg against Tyron Woodley, so there's something pre-existing there. Taking away the mobility will allow Robbie to easily close the distance and impose his will. At the same time, he needs to move laterally and cut off the octagon. Anything to keep Condit from moving. Last thing I'd like to do is highlight a few statistics from Fight Metric. Lawler is more accurate at 44% and Condit at 40%. Robbie has defended 62% of significant strikes, while Condit has defended 57%. Lawler absorbs 3.4 significant strikes per minute, while Condit absorbs 2.28. In that statistic, you can see the evasiveness of Condit, only absorbing 2.28, takes one less punch. Finally, significant strikes landed per minute are about the same. Lawler holds a very small edge. So that's it for the breakdown. My predictions for this event, like I said before, will take place in another video, so if you're interested in seeing that, please make sure to subscribe. Also remember to leave your predictions and thoughts on this fight below as well. I always like to engage pre and post fight. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.